can is pretty easy to work with. But this process, I find that the ink can be a little bit too sticky straight out of the can. So something that I like to do is I like to mix in a tack reducer. Alright. We got to put someplace else. Here we go. So you can find tack reducers, and they sometimes come in little tubes. This is my favorite one. It's been discontinued though. So when we finish this can off, we're done. But in the meantime, you can replace a regular tack reducer. This is Daniel Smith's Miracle Gel. And generally with any sort of ink modifier, you want to start with a small amount and then see how that changes your ink and then add more. So this will make the ink body like a lot looser, and it will make it easier for you to remove the ink with various tools. So one of the challenges with this process is like you're like working the ink, and so you need the ink to act a little bit more like oil paint. Okay, I actually compared this process to painting with oils, and I had a student who was a painter look at me like dead in the eye and was like, "This is nothing like oil painting." And I was like, "Okay, you have a point. The printmaking ink is really its own creature." But we do want to loosen it up a little bit, and I can already feel that that is like substantially looser. If you want to do some additive techniques, and we'll cover that on another day, you can actually loosen it even further with a bit of oil and the Miracle Gel and even a little bit of solvent to kind of really get an ink that you can paint with. All right, now that I've got that kind of mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and roll it out. Okay. Make sure you have it like bevel slamped up, right? I've seen people do like a beautiful monotype on the wrong side of the plexiglass, so just a heads up on that one. So we're going to start out with what they called in the video the dark field technique. I'm just going to roll this up in black ink, and we'll work from there. Now, sometimes you might have an element or an idea in your composition that needs like a hard edge. You can actually keep parts of your image like bright white by using a mixture of kind of subtractive painterly approaches, or even using like a cut paper stencil on top of it. So we're just talking to Brian about that on his piece. Now, I'm going to go ahead and try to ink this up fully, but you can also play around with partial inkings, textured inkings, what have you. The key is that it like kind of, the only rule is there is no rules, right? Actually, that's not true. We do have rules. Don't run anything thick through the press, for the love of God. Poor press.
It's a pressing matter.
Yeah. All right, so I need a little bit more. So we have a piece of paper right now in the water bath. It's not like etching in that the paper doesn't need to soak for a long period of time, because I'm not really asking the paper to be so soft that it can squish down in all those little nooks and crannies like we needed for etching. Here we just really want the surface of the paper to be damp enough to receive the ink richly. So you'll find that if you run the paper through dry, it'll be much harder for you to get an impression with these rich blacks. And so I really do want those blacks to print quite black, and so having dampened paper will help. But it doesn't actually have to be a full soak. It depends on what you need, but. When you're rolling up the slab, something that I have found is that the speed with which you use the roller does matter. So I find that if you're trying to get it inked up and you do like a quick swipe, it tends to pick up ink more, but if you do a slow roll, it tends to lay down more. So if you're actively trying to get the ink to lay down, try to roll it out a little bit more slowly and you'll have better success getting the ink to stick down to the plexi. I can check to see how much ink I've got on that. It's pretty close. I might want a little bit more. Questions?
Do you want it on the bevel?
No. Never. It looks bad.
Sure. Were you saying something last week about like using the light box to trace your picture? I mean, because you couldn't do that with this, obviously.
So I find that the light box technique works best when you're working additively, because you're going to start out with an image, and then you can actually, instead of rolling the whole image, you can actually roll bits of the image in specific colors in specific spaces. One really good technique is you can actually sketch your design in Sharpie on the back of your plexiglass.
Right.
And then you can see through the plexiglass to your design. And you know what's great about that? You can run it to the press multiple times and have pretty good registration because your image is there every single time. You don't even have to like reverse it or anything. It's just on the back of your plate. Okay, I think this is pretty good. We'll roll with this. Okay.
So you have to look at it in a second, right?
Classic. I can use, now one of the things that I would like to advise people, there is always a temptation to remove little small lines. I'm looking at you. You know, like we like small lines, right? But the problem that can happen is if you just take a little needle and you just draw through, it might look good here, but what's happened is the ink hasn't been removed, the ink has just been pushed to the side, like this. When you've got a little hill on either side of that line. And what happens when you run that to the press? That hill gets smushed back down again. And so all the lines, if you don't actually remove the ink from the surface, those lines can get squished back in together. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do like a still life. I'll do over one. So I'm just really lightly kind of thinking about my placement. I'm not actually even really removing hardly any ink at this point. I'm just sort of like thinking, and you know, like when you have the charcoal and you're just kind of like, all right, where's my image gonna go? Maybe I'll have a light source here, then I'll have light falling across a surface here. I'll have a shadow over here. Maybe I'll have a sort of, yeah, sure. That'll be good.
So this was close to oil painting?
Yeah, right? You're like, have you ever done oil painting, Professor? No. Doesn't look like it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to start removing ink. And you can kind of have all sorts of textures as you do that. One thing that I like to think about is imagine looking at your image and feeling like there's a kind of a balance between the sort of volume of light and the volume of dark. I'll show you what a little bit like this does. I'm using the flat edge of it because I can actually get that off, and it's broad enough line that I think that'll still print, right? So, personal note, I collect epicactuses. They're the best. So that's what this is going to be an image of. This is so it's really easy to kind of go too far with the lines, where you're like, okay, then it just becomes a line drawing. It's really important to say, okay, like I'm actually working with light and shadow. I can use a few lines to kind of place some stuff, but in the reality at the end of the day, I really want to be removing more material. So I'm going to have a sort of like table here with light coming through the table, through the window. And I'm going to just kind of like lighten this area here. And it's also really easy to kind of get carried away and spend like all afternoon on one monotype, but you're learning, and so there's like a pretty good chance your first monotype will look bad, right? So like don't sweat it. It's much better to try like lots of things, and then the next monotype will be better, right? So we're still kind of figuring out what things are going to be doing. So I actually recommend setting a timer on yourself and like not spending all afternoon on a single one. Like split it up, try different things, right? See what is going to happen. Keep your marks loose. I know a lot of you really like the sort of finished results, but this is a really great process for people who like to make their own tools. You know how we saw that the Degas bather, where like just the edge was sort of lit? So I have like this window, and I kind of want to do this like dramatic lighting on my epicactus. Queen of the Night. So look, it's the name of the flower.
How many cactuses in your collection?
7? I don't know. Sometimes I got little bits, more than one in a single pot, you know.
Can you use solvents to take out more ink?
You can, absolutely.
Does it give it like a more watercolory?
It can make it like kind of textury, and it sort of reticulates in an interesting and strange way. It's not gonna. It's kind of a droopy little plant, you know, like it doesn't want to go up. It kind of dangles down. Sure. So I don't want to get too like lost in the weeds here, but I do want to get like a sense of that value. Maybe we can do a bit of more experimental sort of different textures in here, so you can kind of see how that will look as well, right? So imagine this here, this vase, gorgeous, has maybe some patterning on it. Like I'll go ahead and do like some patterns here and see how that looks. It's really good to kind of clean your tool. We do have some Q-tips. I find that the Q-tips, they don't have a great like lifespan. They get used up pretty quickly. If you really love working with the Q-tip though, you can go to the pharmacy and get like cosmetic Q-tips, which are pointy. That's always a good option. Okay. Another texture that we haven't really used much is the card. So like the card chip can kind of make these sort of interesting different textures. Maybe there's more than one plant in this pot. It's not all Queen of the Night. What else does it need? Yeah, like, it's your piece. You tell us.
12 miniature cats lounging in the background.
Oh, I like that.
Do you want me to take the paper out of the water?
Okay, alright, I'm done.
Hannah, do you want me to take the paper out of the water?
Sure, that'd be great. Okay, sure, why not? Cover this object. Alright. Any other marks that we think we should kind of do on this? This is kind of where it's at. So I've removed most of like bigger areas of ink. I haven't just sort of drawn with only line. I think the key here is to kind of go for like bigger lines, right? So if you want line work, just have your line work be a little bit more chunky because that will translate a lot better to this process. A little bit of a brighter spot.
Could we just do something like freehand like this just to like practice?
Yeah, in fact, I really encourage you to do something freehand like this to just like practice. I think that's a great idea. There we go.
Better with just the one eye anyways.
He's better with the one eye? Yeah. All right. So what is the step that we always forget, but we're not going to forget this time?
Clean your bubbles.
Clean your bevels. Like it never looks good. Okay. Ooh. When you're going in with the rag, just make sure you don't like wipe your image area off. It's easy to get carried away. All right, now this is ready to print. On this drawing. Thank you. Ready to go again? Okay. So generally speaking for this process, I'm going to recommend that you make a registration template. I didn't do that here. So what I'm seeing is I've got like about 1.25 inches on the left and the right. So I'm going to go ahead and place it 2 inches up and 1.25 inches right there. And that should be good enough. Alright. This press always feels a little bit more firm, so you'll kind of feel the plate go through. Okay. Here goes.